Well, sweet, man. Let's welcome to this episode of what did we come up with?
Another photography podcast.
Another photography podcast.
For now, at least.
That's a great idea. We're just another photography podcast. Is all we are.
Yeah, another one.
Yeah. No, it's good. Now, how you been, Liam?
Good, man. Yeah. Recovering from Christmas time.
Oh yeah, how was
and all
that?
that stuff. It was good. My son Quinn went through like a grumpy phase.
Oh.
Like, I don't know if he had a tooth coming in or something, but we had some meltdowns on Christmas Day. And then like 2 days after, perfect since. Like, he's been great since. It was kind of like a weird, like, I don't know, toddlers.
I got sick. You know, it's like right before Christmas, and then my kids got it.
Yeah.
I don't know if Aaron got it very much, but yeah, no, I think Ezekiel, in addition to that, was also feeling growing pains. He kept saying his legs hurt.
Oh yeah.
Kind of thing. So it was like, we had like 2 days where it was kind of sad. Like, I think right after Christmas. Yeah. But yeah, no, holidays, man. Ours were super laid back.
Yeah.
Because we were all not feeling good.
Nice. Ours was pretty laid back as well. We ended up going to family's house for Christmas dinner, which was nice. But yeah, other than that, just at home. Nice. Normal stuff.
Yeah, ours was at home, and we played some video games together.
Nice.
As a family, you know. We got this one game, dude. It's like it was designed as a 2-player game, and it's called It.2. And basically, the story of the game is it's a husband and wife who are getting a divorce, and yeah, it's rough. It's really cheesy in some places, but but it makes you feel it's not a kid's game.
Yeah, I was going to say.
It makes you feel like a terrible human being. It's actually really funny. But they put all the weight on the child feeling like she's the problem, and so so she's crying over these dolls that she made of her parents and said, "Can't you guys just be friends again?" And she asked this author of this love book to help her fix her parents' marriages, and so as she's crying on these dolls, suddenly the mother and the mom and dad wake up as the dolls.
Okay.
And then they have to go through as these tiny little dolls in their house to figure out, one, what the heck happened, two, how to make it go back to normal. And they're like, oh, they found out their daughter cried on them, so maybe they need their daughter's tears again but so basically what that means is you have all these crazy puzzles, and it's usually you have one gaming spouse and not a gaming spouse. And then both of you guys together have to play a game, and you can't progress without the other person. And so if you have one person who's not really into games, it's simple enough to where they can play with you, but difficult enough to where one or both of you will get very frustrated.
Okay.
And it is like the perfect gamer and the non-gamer spouse kind of game, and the shenanigans because you really have to depend on each other, and so you can throw whatever support in the game mechanics that they have at the time, and then you can just withdraw it while they're trying to progress and just kill them on purpose if you want. And so it's the situational humor of the game is very, very fun. But but whenever we complete a challenge, me and Aaron, we look over at each other all lovingly, and we have these moments, and dude, this game is so great, marriage, gaming, fun. Nice. But yeah, no, that's a fun one.
Cool.
In the thing, but that was our Christmas.
I haven't had video games for years.
Yeah,
I don't remember the last time I played a video game. Not since I moved to the States.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I haven't had a console.
Yeah, I've been off the band game.
I would like one, but not having one is probably the better thing in my life. So if I just continue not having one, it won't suck up any of my time, because I'll get like fully addicted to something. Oh,
100%. That's the only reason I even have it right now. It's like, dude, I've bought a PS5, I've sold it. I've bought an Xbox, I sold it. I bought a Switch, I sold it. Like, because I get so consumed in these things. Yeah. And the only reason I bought a PS5 again is because we had the snow, and we had significant kind of portion off in slow seasons. So it's like, sitting there and we're going to play some games.
Sure.
And so now my kids love sitting with me and playing games together. Nice. So that's a fun one. But
all right. Should we talk about some photography stuff?
Yeah, no, why? Why would we do that?
Sure, I know, right?
Yeah, it's like we had all these. Well, like I walk into your house and we start talking about things. I'm like, oh, this is a good podcast conversation. Now I'm like, what were we talking about?
We could start with the Canon lens blog that you sent me.
Oh yeah.
I had to find my list of topics as well.
let's pull that out here. Because we got, so basically, because last episode we talked about not having a 24 1.4.
Yep.
And a 50 1.4. And they literally dropped the 24 1.4, a 50 1.4. And then another, not white but black, 70 to 200.
Yeah. Oh, they have both. That's just in that picture.
Oh, yeah, black and white. But they made it this new...
Did they drop that in between the last podcast? I thought it was before.
Before the last podcast we did?
I thought they did it in like October.
Well, they might have, but then I had a friend just send me this.
Oh, you just didn't see it?
Yeah, and I'm like, I had no idea. I'm like, freaking hey, here we are. and they seem to have like these three lenses are meant to appeal to both photo and video users, combining fast performance with a design that benefits high-end video applications too. For 3D imaging applications and recording spatial video, that's their other lens. They're 7.8 millimeter. It looks like for VR stuff that they're trying to do. But this is the whole thing I said last time. It's like this hybrid lenses. I don't get it. And they're just completely leaning into it.
Yeah.
It's like the hybrid lens series was introduced earlier in the year to address the high-end multimedia needs of many shooters who split their time between filmmaking and still photograph the lenses. The lenses are fast, optically refined, exhibit virtually no focus breathing. So that must be their thing. Is like the no focus breathing, which is why they require lens correction on stills. Because they're doing it like in lens, in camera, so that when you're focusing, it doesn't have that. And then the L series durability and performance photographers. Oh, dude, freaking L series durability and performance. That reminds me of the thing is freaking EF L series chromatic aberration. You know, and my frustration with that, you know, it's so you said you prefer the 35 1.8 because it has less chromatic aberration than the EF 1.4.
So the 35 the RF 35 1.8 seems great.
Yeah.
And it is great for most things, but I found on a wedding day the focus wasn't quite keeping up with what I wanted it to do compared to what the EF 35 1.4 L original, like version 1, was able to keep up with. So I preferred the focusing USM motor on that old 35 1.4. The image is cleaner on the RF 35 1.8 because it doesn't have as many of the aberrations.
Right.
But the EF 35 1.4 has really bad chromatic aberration if you're wide open, particularly. I think once you stop down at like 2.8, it kind of goes away.
Right. But then it's like, what's the point?
But what's the point?
Right.
So have a 2470 2.8 and just leave it at 35 at that point. So I just haven't really been using any of the 35s. And I was excited for the 35 1.4 VCM because the RF version is probably not going to have as much chromatic aberration. It's got a much shorter flange distance.
Is that what these are called? These are VCM?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's got a way shorter flange distance. So that, I think, is one of the things that helps control chromatic aberration. I think the longer flange distance on the DSLRs was one of the reasons that chromatic aberration would be introduced more often and it was harder to control.
Interesting.
I might be wrong, but that's how I have understood it, at least.
I mean, it sounds right in terms of like, because chromatic aberration is generally like with when you have the moving elements within the lens. It's like, I guess a distance from the sensor would make sense. And that's why the mirrorless have like virtually no chromatic aberrations.
I believe so. That's the way that I've understood it, just from stuff I've seen on the internet. But I don't pay that, like, I don't pay super close attention personally to it. The EF 35 1.4L version 2 had really well controlled. Oh yeah. And that's probably the lens that I would prefer to use, but it's so much bigger. And then when you adapt it to the RF lens, it's just like a really large 35mm 1.4 lens, and I don't like huge lenses for no apparent reason. Right. So I mean, I could have the 35mm lens that I want, but I'm just refusing to use a large 35mm lens. I like the Sigma Art one. It's great, but it's kind of heavy, and when you adapt it, it's super front heavy. Right. And the first time I used it on RF, it didn't really play that nice with it, and that was an old one that I'd been using for 5 years, so that could be the problem. But interesting. So I just ended up kind of abandoning having a 35 that I'll use on a regular basis.
Yeah, that's kind of the same. Like when I got the 35 1.8, I really enjoyed the size of it. And because it's a focal length I virtually never use, because I'm 50-24 guy, it's like I had a hard time incorporating it into photo work.
Yeah.
And also because it's 1.8, it's like I'm so used to shooting at 1.2, 1.4,
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of like, oh, I'm compromising a little bit, but do you think the focus issues have to do, being that we're pairing these with mirrorless sensors, has to do with the fact that it's slightly less light being let in?
Maybe.
And which is why the 1.8 wouldn't be focusing as well as the 1.4?
Maybe, but I find attaching like the EF85 1.8, like that really old one.
Yeah.
I think it focuses just fine.
Yeah, you're right.
I think it's the STM motor. I think it's just not built for the same speed as the USM motor.
Yeah, my 35. It's, you're literally the angle on you, this angle here is the 35 1.8, and then the angle on me is the 35 1.4. Which I have to say, that's the version 1 you said?
Yeah.
Like even looking at this, like I am backlit. I'm actually seeing virtually no chromatic aberration, and although that's like this is lower,
it doesn't show up all the time. When it shows up as you will see it. Like you could zoom in on like the edge of the window frame or something, and you'll see it. Where it shows up as a bigger problem for me is wedding days with a black tux and a white shirt, and like the collar. And the 85 1.8 has that same problem. So it would never bother me if it was just in the background somewhere like that. But when it's on the groom's suit, you can like click on the thing and desaturate it, but then you get gray strip instead. And I'm just like, if it had been anywhere else in the picture, it wouldn't really bother me. But it's on a black and white groom's suit, and it's the subject.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I was going to say, because chromatic aberration correction is probably one of the things that any client would not notice.
Yeah.
But it's like when it is on your subject and the subject of all the things, like being the group, that would make sense.
And for the one time that, you take a beautiful portrait or something and they want that to be the bigger print that they make, or it's like a double page spread in their album or something.
Like, oh my God.
And then you can see this purple line.
Yep.
I just can't, I don't want to deal with it. So if I can have a lens that doesn't do it, which is why I more often now end up using a 24-70 for anything but portraits on a wedding day.
Oh, it's 24-70.
That's what I started using recently, like last few months.
Really?
And the RF one is fantastic.
Okay, so why the 24-70 instead of the 28-70 f2?
It's too damn big.
But it's f2.
It is f2, but I'm quite happy shooting the documentary stuff most of the day with the 24 and having the other camera with the 50 on it or 135 or something, so I can still have some stop down stuff wide open stuff if I want, and use the 24-70 for like documentary kind of stuff.
Well, okay, so then this brings up another question, because so you mentioned before we started shooting that you didn't realize your camera's firmware was not updated.
Correct.
So you said 1.5 or 1.6 was your R6?
I think one of them was 1.5 and the other one might have been like 1.8.
Okay, word. And then so you transitioned to 1.9 on your 1.5. And you said it felt like the autofocus was better.
It felt like it had fixed all the like annoying jitteriness that you might get. When you're in like a wide frame and people are walking down the aisle and there's crowd all over and it wants to grab the crowd before it grabs the bride and her dad at the back. Yeah. I feel like that was significantly less problematic than it had been in the past. It's not perfect, but like better.
Have you tried the 35 1.8 since updating the firmware?
No. I sold it a long time ago.
That's a thought.
I think it might work better now. I've often wondered if like the R3 would drive a lens like that better.
Well, yeah, my buddy has the R3 and he loves his 35 1.8. And I noticed, I feel like we're never going to be able to do a podcast without mentioning Sam Hurd.
Damn it.
we should have like a jar. It's like every time Sam Hurd's
I put $1 in the jar. It's like a swear jar for Sam Hurd's name.
I almost brought this up earlier, but I was like, no, I'm not going to say Sam because I talk about Sam like crazy. But He did a video. I think it was with his family for the holidays or whatever, and it was and he had his R3 with the 35 1.8 on it. And I'm like, it's a great, like, the weight of that is a great combination, and it's like the 35 1.8 just is so small on the body. And so I'm wondering if it's the same thing because they have the eye tracking autofocus, if that's any different.
Yeah.
As well there. But
I
now
have the 28 2.8. I could try it with that and see, because it kind of has the same. Even the 50 1.8, I think, is it's maybe better than the 35, but it still has some. It struggles more in low light to catch that focus. So I should try it.
Swapped my RF 50 1.8 with my buddy's EF 1.8, and they have like 4 different EF 1.8s. This is the one that's like as plastic as it gets,
like the really old one,
worst one.
Yeah.
And then the focus ring is like this tiny little thing, like right on the edge. It's not even a real focus ring. And because I love the flare.
Oh yeah.
On that lens.
Nice. I never used the older one. I only ever had the newer version of it.
Well, no other lens they make, I think, has this, like, it's just a really exaggerated ring.
Nice.
From the sun, and it has these kind of striations in it, and it's beautiful. And it's like, and I would switch from my 51.2 down to the 51.8 just to get the flare.
Nice.
You know,
the EF 51.2L has a really cool, like, red orb. That's like a nice one. You can get it a little bit with the RF 51.2, but like pretty rarely.
Yeah. Okay.
It has to be like just on the horizon and like in between the couple, and you can get this red kind of orb.
Well, I was gonna say, I feel like the 51.2 EF is the one that suffers probably more from chromatic aberration than like all of them.
100%.
So annoying.
Yeah.
You know, it's like 2.2 to maybe have something usable. It's like, it's freaking annoying.
So we derailed ourselves from the VCM conversation.
Oh, I'm all about it. Yeah. Okay, so, let's see. I love rabbit trails, but you're right. Let's So
yeah, I was basically waiting for them to start releasing prime 1.4 lenses.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I have the 51.2 and the 51.8 now, so I'm probably not going to buy the 51.4 VCM unless I sell both of those and use that.
Right.
But for the 35, I was like, the 1.8 doesn't really satisfy what I want for a wedding day, like sturdy, weatherproof, something that I don't need to worry if I get a Colorado rain shower at 4:00 during a ceremony. And I don't want it to be the 35 1.2, which has been rumored for a long time. And I'm sure that'll be as big as the 50 1.2.
Dude, I made a video about the rumors for that, and it never dropped.
I like small-ish, light-ish prime lenses.
Yeah. Like
the old 35 1.4, which is why I still have that one. Oh man, I derailed myself. I wanted those like fast primes, relatively light, L glass, weather sealed, tough enough for a wedding day. 35 1.4 VCM seemed great. Weird distortion issue. Yeah. I think in practice, actually using it and just leaving the corrections on, because I don't worry. I mean, the vignette's nice on like a lens when you have it.
Yeah. But
I'm not too worried if that goes away.
Right.
I do not care about the manual aperture ring, even though it doesn't work on the R6. It only works on the R1 or R5 Mark II. I'll just leave it there and not touch it.
Really?
Yeah, it only works on the newer things. There might be a firmware thing. It's kind of like a quirk of the system at this point.
So these new lenses for the RF mount, that exclusively...
It'll work in video mode, sorry.
Okay, they'll work. So on an R6 Mark I per se.
Yeah.
The aperture ring will work in video mode.
Will work in video mode.
But it won't work in stills mode.
But in stills mode it doesn't, because it's kind of like, it's like a smooth unclicked aperture ring. It's kind of made for video shooters. Video.
That makes sense.
I don't need an aperture ring on the lens. If the camera's designed that way, like a Fuji, I can use it that way and it feels nice, but there's so many buttons on the back of the R6, I don't need another thing. Like I don't even use the control ring on the lens.
Yeah.
Because I don't need more custom things. Yeah, so I mean, maybe one day I'll get a 35 1.4 VCM and see if I like it or not. Yeah,
because it's like, so my position is I have the 35 1.8. And then, but the two lenses, probably the lens I use the most on a wedding day is a 24 1.4.
Yeah.
But I have the Sigma, which.
So would you try the 1.4 VCM?
This is what I was all excited about, was the 24 1.4, or 1.2. I was hoping for 1.2 maybe, it's like, I don't know how the physics of that would work, but then I was super bummed when it's like, it's these hybrid lenses, and the 35 had the weird, requiring lens correction. And because I do have the 16 2.8, that it's, I don't know, what do they call those? The silver ring lenses?
The STM one.
STM, is that what they call it? Okay.
Oh, that's just what the motor is. So instead of the USM, it's an STM.
Got you. Yeah, because I use that because it's so much lighter, and so I do love using that on the dance floor, for reception photos. And while I do like the look of my 14 Samyang, so which I'll end up using probably all the time just because I like the look, it's so nice to have a really light 16. And that thing, I realize, is radically distorted. Not radically, it's not insignificantly distorted.
It's known for its distortion. Yeah.
Right. And so it's like I would have to correct virtually all of those. And I feel like I lose the 16. I feel like it goes to an 18.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And so I'm like, is this even a 24?
Yeah.
Or is it a 26? Which, okay, who cares? But I'm like, but it's an L series lens, bro.
Yeah.
And I'm like, just call it a 26. If it requires correction, it's going to be a 26.
It's weird. And the other thing with that, megapixels don't really bother me too much.
Same.
But sometimes when I'm losing them unwillingly, it's a little bit annoying. Right. So if you're on a 24 megapixel, the correction on the 35 1.4 VCM, you lose about 3 megapixels, I think. So you go down to a 21 megapixel thing, which is fine. You could print that massive and it'll be okay. But it's just a little bit like, I didn't choose to lose those.
Yeah, that's not nothing.
So it's annoying. So on an R6, you're probably going to be down to 17.
Right. Yeah,
so that gives me a little bit of pause, because I'm like, well, sometimes I crop a little bit. One thing I don't care particularly about cropping, because I don't crop a lot.
Same.
Which is why I like 20 megapixels and I like the file size.
Right.
But when I'm just forced to start at a lower megapixel, I'm like,
right.
That's annoying. So I don't know if the 24 is as bad as the 35. I feel like I haven't seen as many people say that the 24 and the 50 are as badly corrected.
Right. It's like, well, here it's like, okay, I guess I could buy the lens and make a review. It's like, I like your review videos. You have very good review videos.
Well, thanks. I always think they're terrible because I don't check enough of the facts. I'm just kind of like, this is how I feel.
Right.
All feelings, no facts on this.
Dude, unfortunately, that's kind of all the internet really cares about.
Yeah.
I mean, no, it's not all it cares about, but like, I feel like the majority of the noise that goes out on the internet are reviews, and I'm a sucker for them. I watch 10 reviews on the same thing.
I've actually like in the 4 years or something that I had been posting, and I guess I haven't posted much in the last couple of years, but there is always in the comments, I think more people that, let me start again. With review videos, I think that more of the people that watch them after buying the thing in order to validate their own purchase. Because I almost get more comments that are like, I have this and actually it's really good and blah, 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 blah.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
I think I'm guilty of that. I'm trying to think of the stuff I do that. I buy the thing and then I just watch it. Because it's almost like you're like, it's part of the obsession or part of the like, it's like when you got a game as a kid and you would have the game, but you would read the little book pamphlet in the case, on your way home or whatever. Yeah. It's like, and then when you weren't playing because your gaming time was up, you're back in your room looking at the book. Yeah. Sort of thing. So I feel like that's kind of probably a similar thing. Yeah. There it's like, or maybe you're excited to learn something about your gear that you didn't know. Because especially with cameras, if we're talking about cameras, there's like, I stereotypically am the dude who doesn't read the manual, And I would much rather watch people online unpack that. Yeah. And then get some cool ideas of, you could do, like, that was the thing. I bought the R6. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is great. And then put another $1 in the jar. Sam Hurd comes out with how he sets up his autofocus, and I'm like, no way you can do that. And then I did that. And I was like, I was mistaken about the whole purpose of this camera. the whole purpose of this camera is this amazing autofocus feature that has never existed on, any other Canon camera.
Yeah.
Holy cow. And it's like, I think he said on his R5 review, he's like, I have to try to misfocus. And I'm like, I'm looking at his little video on how he's doing it. I'm like, how did you do that? And I texted him and he showed me how to do the thing. I'm like, no freaking way. And then I've showed a bunch of people since then, and it's blown all of our minds. And I'm like, I can't fathom the amount of people with this camera that have no idea how good the autofocus can be.
Yeah.
In the thing. But so like, okay, so we mentioned the 24. If I'm going to buy one of these, I'm buying the 24.
Yeah.
So so it says looking at the primes first, the RF24 1.4L VCM and RF50 1.4L VCM. Dude, so many words, letters. Yeah. These lenses bookend the existing 35 1.4 and add a wider and narrower focal length options while maintaining the same 1.4 speed. That's crucial for low light shooting and depth of field control. The 24 is a great option for establishing shots, landscapes, cityscapes, and interiors, while the 50 is standard normal focal length. That's versatile enough for portraits, landscapes, and more selective views of the broader scene. Thanks for telling us that, Canon. I didn't know these things. Both lenses feature dedicated manual iris ring, which, it was always interesting to me how like more vintage lenses had that.
Yeah.
I guess they were always more stop down rather than just kind of the smooth transition. So the VCM stands for voice coil motor.
Voice coil motor, yeah.
Okay. Linear AF system and a nano USM AF system to adjust the floating focus elements for maintained sharpness throughout the focusing range. The 24 millimeter focuses down to 9.4 inches. That's interesting. I wonder what my 24 minimum focus distance is. It's like because
It's that or less, because it seems like it can get fairly close.
Yeah, that's interesting. And the 50 focuses at 15.7 inches. Which to me feels like...
That feels far.
It does. Like, I think that's more than the 51.2.
I think so. I can get pretty close to that 1.2.
Yeah, I feel like I can too. And
I'll do ring shots with that.
Same.
I just don't even bother with
I literally flip it to manual and I do it to the closest focus distance and I just kind of
I track it until it goes red and then I back up a little bit.
Yeah. I do that, but manually, Okay, VCM rear focusing system is effectively silent, offers smooth movement. This is really kind of more video related features.
One of the things, so there's been so many like complaints about these like VCM things. I keep seeing people being like, this is weird, this blah blah blah. When I think Canon are doing the right thing by trying to please photo and video, because so many people seem to be shooting hybrid.
Right.
But I don't know if everybody actually is shooting hybrid or just everybody on YouTube.
Right.
Like there's a whole bunch of people that are doing that. There's a bunch of people that are maybe trying to shoot wedding videos and photos at the same time, like Taylor Jackson kind of style.
Very fair.
But I think most of the market probably is doing one or the other still at this point. However, when you try and do something to please everybody, you end up pleasing nobody, because you make these like compromises either way.
Right.
That being said, I would wager, having not used any of these, I would wager that these VCM lenses will be excellent in both those environments.
Yeah, I think you're probably right.
Like for video, I don't really know for video, but the non-focus breathing seems to be like a big thing for video people. So it's going to be nice that it's not got focus breathing. Maybe the corrections are nice for video people. I'm not really sure. And if you just leave the corrections on and don't think about it,
right?
Like, I don't think there'll be any. I don't think you're going to look at it and be like, this has got a weird distortion on it,
right?
Or this is 3 megapixels shorter than what I would expect from my camera. I think it would. If you don't pixel peep and nitpick at all the little details and just use it.
Yeah,
I bet it's fantastic.
Yeah, that's the problem with all my criticisms. It's just all secondhand or like he said, she said criticisms.
Yeah,
and it's like I'm sure once I actually get the thing in my freaking hands, I'll probably like. That's the real problem, is I'm talking about something I have nothing to say about yet.
I'll eventually report on something because I have a little like gear bucket in my bank account. Nice. So like 10% of all my deposits, so that I don't overspend something on gear. Amazing. 10% of all my deposits are going into the gear fund. I'm going to buy the 7200 I've never owned
no
one.
way. No way.
I've never owned one, and I've never liked how big and heavy they were.
Yeah.
And this new one is internally zooming. You can put a 2x teleconverter on it, and it's fairly light.
That is something.
I think it's like 2.5 pounds or something.
Being able to do video on a gimbal with it, getting the crazy.
That's one of the things about the uniform size, which was one of my criticisms, because that's a ball ache if you're trying to pull lenses out of a bag.
Yeah.
And you don't know if you're grabbing your 24 or your 50.
Right.
And you have to like stick colored tape on it or something so that you can like easily do it like in a dark environment in the moment instead of trying to see which one you're holding. Like that's one of the downsides for me.
Haven't had that problem because I have Sigma and Canon.
Yeah.
Between my 24
I don't really have that problem with any of the lenses I have just now, but if I was going to get that 24 1.4 and 50 1.4.
Yeah, they do look.
And if they release an 85 1.4.
Right.
Like I'm a fan of 35 85.
They have the 50 85. They have the 85 1.8 right now. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's an
No,
F2.
it's F2. Yeah. Which everybody said was garbage that I talked to who used it.
I've heard that as well. And seen a review side by side of the two of them. The 85 1.8, even at the same settings as the 1.2, is
the
brighter.
EF one you mentioned last time.
The EF, the little gold ring EF from 1993 or 1992 or something, has better light transmission at the same aperture. It looks like.
No way.
So it was slightly brighter at F2 than the RF F2, but the RF F2 might have been like sharper around the frame.
I mean, that feels very damning just in and of itself.
Yeah,
it's like for the
didn't
F2.
have the chromatic aberration problem, but
right.
seemed like it lost in all the other things.
And every other thing that makes you care about a lens. I guess, it's like
people like old lenses now as well because they've got that character.
Right, right. And that was what was crazy to me about Canon's 51.2 is it feels like a really super modern lens that's absolutely beautiful and absolutely super tack sharp. But it also has characteristics about it like the vignetting. I rarely ever want to correct for it because it's pleasing in some way. And then when you point it straight into a bright light source, you get unique flaring that is unique to that lens alone, which is absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
But versus, you get unique, like, and granted, dude, I freaking keep the 51.8 in my bag just so I can have the flaring off of that. So it's like, they made a really sharp lens that's really beautiful. And they also managed to give it characteristics to where, like, my criticism of the Sigma 51.4, which was my workhorse for the longest time, was, I hate to use the word sterile, but it was like, it was really freaking close to a perfect lens in terms of like, I was not a sharpness pixel peeper in the corners or whatever, but it was very, very nice. And if I were to criticize it, it would, it had nice background bokeh. It wasn't as radial bokeh-y as the 51.2. And it was nice, but it just didn't have these like nuances or quirks necessarily. Which
we all like and pick up on. Like when you look at 150 side by side.
Right.
And at the end of the day, like if it does the job, if it focuses properly and it's sharp and you can deliver a nice picture to the client, nobody's going to be like, oh man, I wish it had that swirly bokeh from the RF 1.2 version, or like.
Yeah. Well, I'll push back on that idea because.
Okay. Some clients might.
Well, I don't think. Okay. Well, I agree with your point. Clients won't notice, but I don't think the lenses and the characteristic of the lenses are really for the client anyways.
No.
I think it's for, like, if you're like, I had one of my mentors, she was a painter as well. And so she would always bring up this comparison of having like a full frame versus a crop sensor. She's like, when you get the expensive canvas, it interacts differently with your brushes. Mm-hmm. If you have good brushes, you feel the difference between good and bad brushes and all of these things. And it's like, and it changes how you work or how you create.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I got the 51.2 and it tickled my fancy in ways I didn't know I wanted to be tickled.
Yeah.
It's like, so I'm like, and it made me get ideas or create in a certain way or like go after certain aesthetics. So I'm like, I really think in the same way, it's like, okay, so I love guitar. Every guitar that I have makes me play completely differently. Mm-hmm. And I can't really put a price. If photography is my profession, is my career, how much is the value of a lens that inspires me to make something just because the nuances versus like, okay, well, this was $2,500 and this one is $900. Why would I do that when this one does 98% of what the other one does?
Yeah.
It's like, because it doesn't exactly do 98. It does different category of things in maybe a certain way. And yeah, clients are going to notice, but if me, the person who's creating the thing, suddenly create something new to me, not necessarily new to the world.
Yeah.
It's like I think that's invaluable.
Sure.
So yeah, if I'm starting, I can take a 51.8 and then shoot a whole wedding with a 51.8 and be like, yeah. And then maybe I want to correct some chromatic aberrations and apply some lenses. It'll take me longer to edit. But that's the other thing, is it'll take me longer to edit. You know?
Yeah.
And that's also very valuable.
Yeah.
I think. And that was like, I will say getting a 51.2 did expedite my editing time.
Yeah.
Because I pull it up and I'm like, oh my God, this image is beautiful.
Already looks
I don't
great.
want to touch it. So I'll move on to the next photo. And
Yeah.
it's like, and when we're talking about lens corrections, that's not just a like click and done. Maybe some people is click and done, but it's like, I like to I wanted to get rid of chromatic aberrations, but I didn't want to get rid of the vignette, or it's like I wanted half of the vignette. So then I'm scrolling down to that portion of Lightroom and I'm doing that. And you've already kind of tripled your edit time.
Yeah.
You know, on a thing. So it's like, so why spend $2,500? If that's your main career and you're creating a faster workflow to produce something that like,
Sure.
that's a buddy of mine who was a pressure washer. You know, he was like, he could get a house done, and I don't know what the time was, but he said like half an hour. People were like, oh, if it only takes you half an hour, why are you X $100, whatever? And he goes, well, I spent money on the good thing to be able to do this faster.
Yeah.
So it's like, wrong question, you know. It's
as with everything that I say, there's a
million caveats.
There's an inverse to it as well. And in jar.
Right. Oh, let's go. What are your...
There's like an inverse to all that as well. Like, yeah, like, yes, I think as a working professional who does this as a full-time job, you could be like, I'm going to invest in the $2,000 lens over the $200 lens because I can deliver something with a slight edge, you know, not $1,800 difference in image quality, but like there is a difference to the 1.2 over the 1.8 when you're shooting wide open. It's just it's a bit more beautiful, a bit more contrasty, you know, like there's a glow maybe to the image that you might not get from the cheaper one. But if you are like, even if you're a working professional, I talked about like some professionals that I've heard talk about with great careers whose images are just mediocre.
Yeah.
The nicer gear doesn't really make the nicer picture.
Right.
You know, so I'm thinking about, I've got Leica in my head now, because whenever I talk about Leica on the internet, like last year I rented a 35 F2 Summicron version 6, $3,800 lens. Absolutely best lens I've ever used. Absolutely gorgeous. Feels great on the camera. Balances beautifully. Like nothing about it was unpleasant. The image quality is like perfect. The out of focus areas are beautiful. They're pleasing. Like it was great. And I also have a $400 Voigtlander lens that I've been using since that's the only lens I ever owned for that camera. And it's I prefer it. Not looks wise, but like I have $3,500 more in my bank account. And I can do all the things that I want that Voigtlander lens to do for me.
Which the money in the account is something to be said.
And I like the pictures that it makes. And the $3,800 lens didn't elevate what I was making in my mind any higher than what it was. However, if I'm selling those images to clients, I would just pay for the $3,800 lens for those times that shooting wide open would make that little tiny bit of difference.
Well, is it about making the difference, or is it about how you feel about your process?
Maybe about how I feel about my process as well, but I like the way the smaller Voigtlander lens feels in my hand over the Summicron, because it's it was just, I've got small hands as well, but it's just like so like compact and delicate, and and it, maybe the focus pull is a little stiff compared to what I would like. I preferred that on the Summicron, but
because it's just a little knobby knob for the focus right here.
Yeah, and the Summicron has the same thing, but it was a slightly different shape, and I found it mildly less comfortable maybe, although it pulled easier. It was smoother. There's all these sort of different nuances, but there's Leica photographer channels who I've seen some of their videos on YouTube.
Yeah.
And they buy the Leica lenses because the Leica world might say to you, I don't understand why you'd have a Leica body and not put a Leica lens on it. That's the point. And for me, it's not the point. I like the operation of the camera, and the image quality of Voigtlander for what I want and what I need is good, more than good enough. But like the people with the nice, expensive stuff, sometimes their pictures are just meh.
Right.
But they get something from it because they're like, I like the quality of this image, and I don't know what, like. There's always the inverse, you know.
Right.
Like I if I can make great work that I like on the cheaper lens, and be really happy with it, that's I feel like that's great. Like this is the sort of does the gear matter thing. I think the gear only matters when. Like the little Voigtlander lens matters to me because it's the right size, it's the right shape, it handles well, it does the things I need it to do.
It's also pretty.
And it's pretty. And the more expensive lens is beautiful, but it's not. It wasn't elevating.
It wasn't changing anything.
Yeah, it wasn't for me. It wasn't it wasn't allowing me to make better work,
right,
or do anything like that. Whereas the 51.2, when you're shooting a portrait of a couple at sunset at 1.2, does give you a little bit of elevation if you can utilize it properly. Or sometimes it might also give you something to lean back on to cover up any inadequacies in your work as well.
Well, that was one of the things that my friend Rob Tesser, who I mentioned last podcast, is like he wasn't using, I can't remember which 50 he was using, but he would never shoot at 1.2, on because he switched from Nikon to Canon. So when he did switch to Canon and he got an R6 and then he got the 51.2, he was just blown away by the tack sharpness and how it always kind of like, wow, landed on the eye. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh. But then the other thing was because it was a 1.2, he didn't have to edit flyaway hairs.
Yeah.
Because they were just out of focus.
They weren't there.
And it just looks great. And I'm like, that's a massive practical money saver. If it's a time saver, it's a money saver, especially with the turnaround time for our weddings. It's and you're going through 800, 900 photos, trying to edit these things. It's like, that to me seems like a practical thing, because you're using the Leicas for street photography. Yeah. Which I finally got to look at your street photography portfolio and I was like, holy crap. I love this stuff.
Thank you.
Almost. Can I say I like it even more than your wedding stuff? No. I think when I went back to your wedding portfolio after looking at your street photography stuff, I think I understood your DNA a little bit better, your creative DNA a little bit better. And it's like, and it made me want to do street photography. It's like when you put one person in shadow and one person in, light, and then the way you compose certain things and everything. And, yeah, well, I realized, like, because you brought up street photography before and how you love that, and I didn't even know that you had a street photography portfolio. So then I went and looked for it. I'm like, holy crap, this is awesome.
Nice.
Which, it's a whole nother. Do you have a website for that, or is it just?
I just use like the free Adobe portfolio thing on the website. And I don't know the last time I updated it. I think it's under just the liamgordon.com, like the same as my YouTube channel.
Oh, word. I was gonna say you need to make like a portfolio page for that. It's like, you know how PicTime has their gallery delivery and then they have the fine art.
Yeah.
You should make a PicTime fine art.
Put it in the art gallery
because your stuff's great, man.
Thanks.
I love your street photography.
Thank you.
I have to get into I've never touched that mindset before. The street photographer mindset.
When there's a pandemic and you don't have kids, it's a really good hobby, because I had to drive an hour to Denver most of the time that I wanted to do it. Like I can walk around the Springs, but it's far harder. The quieter a place gets, the harder it is to get close to people.
Right.
The more Like, so that's why I like going to the balloon festival, which is only a couple blocks from here.
Yeah.
So you can get up at 6 a.m., walk over to the balloon festival, and everyone is bathed in perfect sunrise light with these inflating balloons around them, and it's like street photography heaven.
Yeah.
It's so much fun. But that happens 3 days a year. So if you want it any other time, it's just kind of like, it's a much harder thing. Like, it requires a lot of time. Like, I would go out before Quinn, I would take 1 day every 2 weeks, maybe every week if I'm lucky, and just 8 hours in Denver walking around. And if I got 4 pictures, that was a really good day.
Yeah.
I would take hundreds, but like most of it is utter crap.
Yeah, that's I'm reminded of a story. I can't remember which photographer. It was like some National Geographic kind of talk I was listening to. He was talking about how he had his, flagship Nikon. I think at the time it was like a D4S or something. And then he had like an 800 millimeter, these massive stuff. And he was, that guy covered on the safari, but there was a bunch of tourists also on the safari.
Yeah.
And they had a little, digital point and shoot. And they're like, oh man, bet you're getting some good photos with that camera. That's what they said. And he goes, hopefully 1 or 2. And he's being completely serious.
Yeah.
It's like when Nat Geo, that's what you get the shot.
Yeah.
And then the guy's like, oh, you must not be a very good photographer. I'm getting hundreds of good ones.
No, you're not. No.
I think the standards are a little bit different, in that context. But it's, I feel like if I'm doing street photography, a buddy of mine asked me, why don't you do fine art photography? And I ended up sitting there thinking for 5 minutes without saying any words, something along those lines. And I was like, I think art costs too much. Like, costs me to make something that I consider art. Yeah. Costs me too much is what I mean. Yeah. I think because my standard of like, yeah, but Michael, you're shooting weddings and you're making art, all this stuff. It's like, yeah, I'm capturing moments and these things that are invaluable to my clients or whatever. But if I'm trying to suddenly make whatever I'm making about me, there's almost a fear there. Yeah. If that, I don't think I've actually talked about this or thought about this. It's like, does this make sense that it's almost like a vulnerability?
Possibly. Like, I think whenever, I don't know if anything that I've done could be considered art, but I know that people will say photography is an art form. I feel like it's kind of, it can bridge the gap between just being a commodity and an art sometimes. Yeah. Well, there is a vulnerability in putting something that you made out you just made it for yourself. So like, right. I only really have street photography as a reference for this, or just like walking the dog photography, because I'll always carry something, and that can still kind of fall under street. But there's a process in doing all of these things, and when I walk around with my camera, 99% of the time I'm failing at it. And when I made YouTube videos about the street photography process, I was putting out my failures all of the time. Most of the time. I was like, I tried to do this is how it came out. It didn't really work out how I wanted it to. Maybe if this would have been better, blah, blah, blah. And then sometimes I'd be like, I love this one. This isn't exactly what I imagined. This thing just happened in front of me. All these little pieces fell in place, and I really like it, and I'm so glad how that turned out. Yeah. And sometimes people would maybe not watch the whole video, and there'd just be a comment under there like, your pictures suck. This all sucks. And sometimes it'd be in like a foreign language. Sometimes I'd have to translate it, and it'd be like, your pictures suck. I'm like, great, thank you. But like, it can be kind of like a fear of like maybe the way you're judged, or just like you have to find all of the stuff yourself. Whereas in a wedding, you're hired to go to something that will be in some way interesting. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, first off, you have weddings. So the funny thing about, oh man, I have so many points I just want to address in the thing. Okay. Actually, I'm going to take this whole have not stuck to any sort of script. Oh no. Again, this is my preference. I was like, we're going to be able to break this up into 3 mini episodes and like put it out in clips. We've been all over the show. No, this is how I prefer it anyways, is we find something interesting and we take that rabbit trail. So I'm going to take this kind of whole wedding
and what's interesting about shooting weddings, and put it over here. And then just address what you said about your process in finding the shot with street photography. Because you set yourself out to go do the thing, to go get the shot. And you had an idea of what you wanted. I think this is part of what terrifies me is like, okay, one, I have an idea and I want to pursue it. I don't know if I can ideate that idea to be something that's as good as I want it to be, first off, you know, and then second off, do I even have the ability to create or capture? Because then you get into the question, are we capturing or are we creating in this context? And then you just stood in a place and you failed X amount of times. And that's part of the costing that I was mentioning. It's like, okay, it's going to take a tremendous amount of effort to even get to the thing that I'm ideating or envisioning. You know, it's like, it is a different thing to have a vision and try and fulfill that vision than it is to go into and be an empty slate and then photojournalize or capture whatever's there. And that's what I feel weddings for me is, you know. But then if I'm making something that's about what I see and I'm trying to pull out of the world with the camera, it's like you mentioned you failed X amount of times and then you happen to get a thing you didn't even expect necessarily from your ideation. So then you captured something that surprised you, and maybe there's 5 elements from an image that are all in synchronicity, behaving in a way that you now see the image and it's now moving. Yeah. That's what I'm terrified of. It's because, yes, like, why don't you do fine art photography? I'm like, I'm not even sure I know what art is. Yeah. You know, and that's kind of the big skirting philosophical kind of thing that we're dancing around is what is even art? And it's like, and one, I don't even know if I'm not sure I know how to answer that question. And then a friend of mine says, have you ever been moved by art before? I'm like, actually, yeah. And he goes, I think that's all you need to do to be able to know what art is. I just don't have words for it. You know, it's like, so how do I make something? Because every time I was touched by art, it's a spiritual experience. It's transcendent. And
my mind went to the completely wrong place there.
Oh, okay.
I was imagining a guy called Art.
Okay.
I knew what you meant, but
right.
My mind just went the wrong path.
That's so funny. That's funny.
Sorry, I derailed you.
No. That's good because it's. Whenever I've been moved by art, I don't think it had anything to do with what the artist intended. No, it might have, and I've had a friend, small town. He was in a band. It was like a duo, and they would make some music, and then they came out with a few records. And I listened to one record one time, and then there's this one song, and it just did something to me. And I asked him, I'm like, bro, you said this and this and this, and instead of saying, yeah, we were trying to do this, he goes, oh, that's amazing that meant that to you. And I was like, oh, there's a disconnect. What I'm getting is different than what he intended, but he's like, the way he phrased these lyrics, I'm like, no, you had to have known that it was touching these deep, deep things. Yeah. And, but I don't know that he did. This is great. And I think he knew that he didn't know that he did. And so it's like when I'm thinking about art, especially in photography content, because visuals are incredibly powerful. It's like, what's that one famous image? You know, the one, I think it was the girl who had survived some bombing attack in Iran or something. And she has the piercing eyes and she has the red.
Oh yeah. It's the Afghan girl.
Yeah. Okay. Afghanistan. And I mean, I wasn't moved by that image like everybody else was, but the more I understand the history, like the moment and where that was captured, the more I see, oh, okay, this image is getting deeper. Yeah. You know? And so I'm like, okay, so I don't know where to begin to start capturing something like that.
All right. Everything you've said here is perfect. It's exactly how you should feel. I think when you make a record, when you paint a picture, when you do photography, what other people take from it is none of our business. Right. Because you just like, you make something and you put it out and other people will make their own conclusions from it. There's, this happens to me all the time. dislike the word storytelling as a photographer because I don't understand what it means. And every time someone, like, I hear there's a story in that or whatever, I'm like, I've never looked at something and thought, I'm going to tell this story of this moment or anything like that, even though that's kind of what you're putting together on a wedding day.
Yeah.
I just see it as like, it's a picture of a thing that happened. And I don't look at pictures and think, excuse me. I don't look at pictures and think, what's the story here?
Right.
And sometimes I watch a YouTube video and someone's like, this person walking in here, where were they maybe coming home from work? Were they feeling sad that day because they've got their head down, all this kind of thing? I'm just like, I just saw a thing that might be interesting and took a picture of that. And then occasionally I'll get comments in my pictures that are like, there's a great story here. I love the story of this. I'm like, I didn't even think about what story might be. Right. I tend to look at a picture more like, what is happening here? Like, I prefer the questions rather than answers from art.
Yes. Yeah, I agree.
Like, that's kind of how I look at things. But other people will look at it and be like, I feel the story.
Interesting.
So when you talk about, you took something from that other person's song, they just made something. They went through their creative process. They probably tried some stuff, iterated a little bit on it, and ended up with this final product. They put it out there, and then you took something from it that they never intended. Right. Because it resonated with you in a certain way. And I think pictures are like that. I think art's like that in general. Yeah. And I'm not a connoisseur on art at all, so I don't know how much bull crap I am talking right now.
Well, okay. So I pose the question to you: have you ever been moved by art in any form?
Sure.
Okay. So then I think that makes you qualified.
Yeah, mostly music and pictures, and I think I've never spent a lot of time in art galleries or anything like that, but
art galleries are probably like, I mean, I dream for the day when I'm in an art gallery and I get hit. You know, I'm standing there and it's just like, people are like, why is this guy crying? You know, like I long for that day. It just hasn't happened in an art gallery.
I've definitely looked at something and been like, wow, that's like wild to look at. That's amazing, or something, like, you know, but I never really thought about what anything means. But that's how my brain works. Yeah. I don't listen to songs and think about what the lyrics mean. Whereas I used to find, especially with like back in the day with Eminem, my friends would know stories about Eminem and like how a lot of his life came through in rap music. I heard like rhythm and words in a rhythm and I would know the words, but I didn't necessarily think about, I didn't have like a film reel of what that story was in my head.
Right. Same. That's my predisposition. Well, I hear music before I hear lyrics, and some people hear lyrics before they hear music. And I've never been the lyrics first person. Yeah.
Yeah, I've not been. I always felt like there was something wrong with me when everyone else is like worrying about the lyrics in a song.
Well, it's like that's almost, because that brings in the creator or the artist who's making that thing, tying the story of the person to what they're making. Mm-hmm. And I think that mattered to me as a, teenager who was into bands and was considering where these guys came from. And I would get the DVDs of their behind the scenes, and, I cared about where they were at, like, philosophically, or what was happening in their lives and where the songs came from. And I think that's entirely valid. I think the art that's been the most deeply, profoundly moving to me, it is something in like I broke out, like, the Switchfoot Beautiful Letdown record?
No.
Okay. That's,
my lack of music knowledge would be probably offensive to you.
Well, that was like, okay, so that was a big record, like what, 15, 20 years ago, something along this. Oh my gosh, it's 2024. So that was 20 years ago, give or take. Holy crap. Okay. So I was listening to that as a teenager, and, you have your, like, I think when you're like 12 to 16 is when all of your music preferences get formed, based on what you're hearing for the first time. I'm like, what did I don't know what I decided. I'm like, I'm going to put on this old, like, I'm going to get nostalgic for a minute. And I put on this record, and it goes through all of the songs. And I think it was just because I'm in a different phase of life, and all of them are like completely demolishing my worldviews, like, of where I'm at in that moment. And they're suddenly relevant to things I'm experiencing in my life in that moment. And it's just breaking me. Like, and I'm like, I used to listen to this thing and thought like the guitar riffs were so freaking cool. And I would sing the lyrics, and it's like, I didn't really think about the lyrics, But one example of this is, if we're adding to the noise, turn off this song. It's just this one lyric.
Yeah.
And I'm like, turn off your stereo radio. If we're adding to the noise, turn off this song. It's I don't even remember the context of the thing, but I just ended up in my car, like looking at the lyrics, and it was like my eyes were open for the first time to whatever was happening, and I don't even know. And I'm like, this was a guy thinking like iPhones weren't even invented yet, you know. And he's talking about turning off the static of whatever is going on in the world,
Yeah,
right? Yeah, like, and I don't remember what it was, but it hit me, and I'm like, oh, that's what art is, like. Friggin', and who knows what he was thinking when he wrote that? Mm-hmm. Who knows if he was thinking one person would experience this 20 years later with technology in a different place, with, you know, like whatever else is we could not anticipate about our life, you know, with the internet being what it is, and social media being what it is, and technology being what it is, and suddenly it just completely wrecking some. I'm getting close to middle age now, you know, dude's life on the car while he's experiencing something. It's the transcendent.
Yeah.
It supersedes the artist. It supersedes wherever I was at in the time that wrote, to where suddenly it was relevant 20 years later.
Yeah.
You know, it transcends time. It transcends, you know, that's why I call it a spiritual experience. Because I'm like, and that's what I'm terrified, or I don't even know if I'll be able to, like, and this is the other thing you said that I wanted to get to. You were just standing in the right place at the right time and captured the thing you weren't expecting when you were after a different thing.
Yeah.
And so the depth of that image was more than any of the other failures that you got along the way.
Yeah.
And I think there's something to be said for that, is like, maybe it's not about us making the thing. Maybe it's about us being transcendently in the right place at the right time with the skill set to be able to capture the thing that we're kind of like aiming at. And I was moved by what you said when you said that. So that's what I was like trying to get to.
I don't think that, I know nothing about this, but I don't think that when Picasso started painting, he knew what the final result was going to be. I think he was like, maybe this will work. I'll try this.
Yeah.
And then goes back to it and maybe goes over something and like, no, I think this way is going to be better. And like, that's why when they like X-ray paintings, they often have like layers of other paintings underneath them.
Over, yeah.
So I think it all sort of, I've never tried to equate street photography with painting before, but it's maybe similar in that kind of way. Just like you just have to be willing to show up and put the time in.
Yeah.
And with time and with practice, you end up finding the things you're actually looking for.
Right.
Because when you go out with a vision, you almost never find the actual, especially with street photography, you don't find the actual vision that you're looking for, but something might happen that's close to it, or something better happens. Yeah, and you just have to be there to react. And but every time it's like maybe. Yeah, maybe.
Right. And then you don't even necessarily know until you go back and review.
Yeah.
Which I think is probably the better. That's how I would describe shooting weddings. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like, because to me, and I've always said this sounds super cheesy, but I genuinely think this is the thing. And the reason I like shooting couples is because the subject, rather than like say a model, and I love model work all day, and that's a holy crap, that's another rabbit trail we could go down, you know, and creativity and individual portraiture or whatever. But it's like when the couple is the subject, the way they interact with each other, how far apart they're standing, how they're looking or not looking at each other, the subject ceases to be one or the other, or even both of them. It becomes the way they're connected to each other.
Yeah.
And that is why I think, you know, one, wedding photography never gets old, even though we're both, I think anybody who listens to us talk will notice we're pretty dang technically oriented, you know? But like, so the longer I've been, you know, doing this as a career, the more I care about black and whites, because it just, to the connection between people.
Yeah.
I feel like, you know, it eliminates color noise. And granted, my company's called The Vibrant, and I love color, and I'm a sucker for color all day. But it's like, I'm now looking for the father-daughter dance and the way the daughter is pulled into her father's shoulder and then the tears coming down.
Yeah.
You know, and that does more for me now than the crazy light technical execution, even though I will forever love the crazy weird off-camera flash technical execution stuff and I will never stop. It's like the things that I value or look for 12 years in shift to, because you can take that technical thing and apply it to anybody and it's great. And I think it's great for that. But what makes somebody's wedding unique now to me is the fact that them and their relationship to all the people in the wedding is unique to them.
Yeah.
And if I can capture that, in addition to getting all the shenanigans and the love and hey, my attention's all over, oh shiny, I want to make these cool weird things, because if my entire portrait section of the gallery I'm delivering all looks the same, then I want to shoot myself, you know. Yeah. It's like, and I need it to be as diverse as my attention span.
Yeah.
You know. So it's like so I love having that and I will forever. But then the thing that keeps me excited to go to a wedding now after, you know, 300 whatever number we're on is like the moments and the relationships.
Yeah.
And that might be why I like your street photography. You know.
Maybe. I found this year in my wedding stuff on a, like, if I get portrait session, I'll always do like some standard stuff, keep grandma happy sort of thing, like the one that they're going to print and put on the mantle, get those out the way, then sort of like work my way into like ones where they're interacting with each other and they're snuggling, the more emotional looking ones, a couple of walking ones, and then I'll try for like a more creative odd one or two. But if I don't get the time to do that, I would rather take the keep grandma happy, the grandma's mantle picture, just smile at the camera, have that in the bag, maybe a couple like interaction ones, because I can do those really quick, especially with couples I've done an engagement session with before. And if that's all the time there is for portraits, or if the couple aren't really into portraits, which I've had a few times this year,
interesting,
I am happy to play around with candid stuff and do dance floor stuff and you know, try and be creative through the framing of candid moments, kind of thing. Like I would rather give people a reflection of how their day felt, and let go of the portrait session, and just give them a couple nice portraits, and then have loads of portrait time, but not as much candid picture time. Because I think 30 years from now, when they're looking back, maybe they've got kids, they're showing them an album they made, I would rather have
the timeless ones, the
ones where they're how the day felt was shown, rather than portraits which may or may not age well. No idea.
Well, it's like, how do we know if what is it? I guess the crop of the here. So you see how they're smiling at each other in a certain way, but you can't see their eyes or whatever. It's
and I think those, and you know, to be fair, I think those will age fine.
I agree.
Because in, like, if you look back at famous photojournalist pictures, stuff like that from back in the day, close-ups, you know, slightly oddly cropped stuff it's not like out of fashion, it's not bad, it's not it's the post-processing effects that tend to be the thing that goes stale. Like the white vignette of the 1980s was the soft focus, like, you know, the super hazy sort of things. Those sepia, are,
speaking of, haven't
sepia,
seen sepia, and thankfully haven't seen sepia in decades.
Those are things that went stale a long time ago and never really came back. Whereas the direct flash thing was a thing in the 60s and 70s, because that's how
what technology was.
That's what it was, and I think still looks good. And it came back as a trend. And it may go away as a trend, but I think it'll be fine in the future. It'll still hold up. It's
not cool to say, but I do think it has more staying power. Than certain things, for sure.
What I think won't have staying power is the blurry photo trend.
I was just wondering
if done badly.
If done,
because there are blurry photos of many great photographers which were done well in a certain way.
Right.
So like when the couple are moving, and we might have talked about this already, when the couple are moving and you get a blurry picture of them moving in a sort of intentional way, it's really hard to describe what an intentional way looks like.
Right.
But if you go to their details,
this is the artistry
and
thing.
just flick your camera at a 60th of a second to make a blurry invite, that's not going to hold up.
That don't tickle my
over
fancy.
Time. That's just like, I don't think that's gonna fade away. But the better versions of it, like the couple running towards you, anything where like a piece of the image is still sort of legible, when you look at it, will be fine.
Yeah, well, it's like you said, like, okay, if we do it the right way, and I think that's where the artistry comes in. It's like, what is the right way? I can't give you words for what the right way is, but I know it when I see it. Yeah, and so it's kind of like,
trying it with the invites is fine. Yeah, like it's a maybe, isn't it? Every time you're like, oh, maybe, like, maybe that'll work out. But do one that's sharp just in case. Right.
Maybe it'll work. Maybe you'll get made fun of by podcasters on the internet.
Yeah, maybe.
And I reserve the right to make fun of you. It's
plenty they can make fun of us about.
Yeah, I would agree. It's funny. I did a podcast with my friend Michelle, and partners in the thing, and we basically went through and dollar in the bucket, looked through other photographers' portfolios and talked about what we loved about it and the stuff. And Sam heard, and then people's dislike of his portfolio because they thought their criticism was it's not timeless. And I'm like, I would consider his work modern, at least as the portfolio stuff that he shares, and to be modern and timeless aren't necessarily synonymous.
Yeah. I don't like the word timeless either.
Yeah.
Because you know what wasn't timeless in 1970?
What?
Color pictures.
That's funny.
Real photographers don't shoot color.
That's funny.
What wasn't timeless in 1930, 40, 50 or something like that? 35 millimeter. Real photographers shoot
8x10
slide. 8x10s, wet plates or whatever it is.
Yep.
So it's the same.
All these kids running around with the 35 millimeter cameras thinking they're photographers.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know necessarily what timeless mean. I think it means different things to different people.
That's fair.
I think I don't know that Sam Hurd's photos could be considered not timeless or whatever, because he's been doing it since 2000 something.
Yeah.
And if he started shooting wide open stuff back then, because his portfolio kind of looks like that all the time, and he's only improved on that process. His old stuff, even though it's maybe only 15 years ago, it looks fine. I
think that's also a testament to him picking a style and committing to it. Yeah. It's like his portfolio works together cohesively over a decade. Yeah. That's massive. It's like I'd have to go back to my year 4 or 5, and then up to then, it's like before then, it was like, oh, you're trying to lift your blacks like Sam, And then I was copying other photographers before then, and which actually the stuff I was first doing probably fits in my portfolio better now than it did for that window I was trying to copy Sam. But
also, why does it have to be timeless? How many wedding pictures have you ever looked at and thought that's timeless? Mm-hmm. Because the way stuff looks now, if you're looking at some of the trendy stuff like the Lux wedding kind of look or something, it might have had a day back in the 90s or something. There might have been a Lux wedding look previously as well. Yeah. The nicer weddings that have stood the test of time a bit longer. Right. But you can almost always look at a suit and be like, that's a suit from the 90s. Right.
So it's funny you just mentioned the wear. So the dresses, so that's why I can't necessarily pull stuff from 10 years ago and keep it in my portfolio now, because you can tell the era is different from the dresses. Yeah. Or the outfits or whatever those are. So it's like there is an element of you having to keep your stuff current, even though maybe your old work holds up really well. But it's like it is actually the outfits. My friend brought this up to me as well, that kind of reveal the era that you're in. Yeah. And I would agree, sometimes having, let's say, a photographer that you had made images that were trendy that's what they were enjoying doing, and that's what they were making. And then you can go back and look at your wedding album, and that reveals to you the era that you got married in. That's not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah.
That those photos have to hold up 30, 40, 50, 60 years later.
Yeah.
You know, when your grandkids are looking at them. It's like, no, when I look at my parents' photos, I'm like, dude, that is, what is that, the 70s, 80s, you know, the 80s, you know, and you could tell it was the 80s.
Yeah.
You know, and you had the big poofy shoulder things.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, a la Napoleon Dynamite, you know. And I think it's definitely not timeless. And I think it's a vibe that creates nostalgia.
Yeah.
You know, I think.
Nostalgia is a powerful thing.
Yeah.
Because, like, as I sort of came into adulthood in the 2000s, everything from the 90s was dated, ugly, and, like, past, basically. Yeah. Now the 90s is 30 years ago, and people love that direct flash, point and shoot, grainy film.
Yep.
Like, poorly exposed kind of look, and are equating that with a maybe a more timeless look, or maybe it's just a 90s look or something. But it's just a circle of trends where it's coming back.
Well, if I think anything
and I'm just holding on to my little point and shoot cameras, waiting for those to be the ones that people want me to bring to weddings again.
Well, I think if anything's consistent is the grand majority of clients don't necessarily know what they want. And, you know, I think we as artists, and, you know, we have photographers from all variations of skill levels who are all kind of doing weddings and doing work that interests us. It's like, I think it is a beautiful thing when you find a photographer whose work you resonate with,
mm-hmm.
and then they resonate with making that sort of look and that style. And then the marriage of those two things is signing a contract with that photographer, having them execute your wedding. And then it's like, I don't think anybody should necessarily tell you, like, I mean, assuming they were good and their intention, and they're not, you know, not proficient or you know, incompetent or not professional, you know, it's like, no, I think you got exactly what you wanted. It's like in doing the thing. Do you know what you want? It's like, if you're like, oh my gosh, I need to have this person, I think that's a rare thing to find. Yeah. Because a lot of people, I'm like, oh, I don't know. Tell me what I should be looking for. And I've had people I've sat down with, and they're like, I don't think I'm your vibe. Yeah. It's like, when you see this photographer, what do you, oh my gosh, that's what I want. Here's this photographer's information. You know? And it's like, because I want them to have what they want. Yeah. Which might change. Yeah. But we all change like that. Yeah. And because, like, if I see photos of me being an emo kid when I'm 16, it's freaking, like, I'm glad I'm not that anymore. But it's like, it's fun to look at, and I'm glad I have the photos. I've had 2 client prospects that I have steered away from me in the last couple of years. Same, actually. The first one, I never meet people in coffee shops, but they were, like, coming to town to look at venues, and they're like, we want to meet you in person. And I was like, fine, we'll go to the coffee shop around the corner, and we'll have a chat there. And as we're talking, I'm very much into, like, non-intervention as much as possible, unless I have to, like, candid pictures throughout the day. And then portrait session, I'll pose heavily and prompt people. I think what she was looking for was specific posing, which to me sometimes ends up feeling more stiff or posed. I like to also get some natural candids in there. But she also was looking for, like, Photoshop retouching. She was like, my face needs a lot of work. One of my eyes is a little bit smaller than the other or lower. And she did not need any Photoshop work. Like, she looked symmetrical to me. That's the most terrifying to me when they say they need a ton of work, and you're like, I am not sure what Photoshop work you would even be looking for. And I was like, I don't do a ton of it. Right. And she was like, tell me about someone else, like her sister or someone who, she was like, you could see every imperfection. And I was like, I'm not going to get rid of your crow's feet. I'm all about imperfections, bro. If you have some stuff you're printing in your album and you just want it, like, touched up a little bit, no worries. Let me know what pictures they are. I'll do that. And I was like, but look, what we've talked about, if my portfolio gives you pause, if any of this gives you pause,
I don't think you should hire me.
Right.
But what I can tell you is that if you like my portfolio, that's what you can expect to get from me.
Right.
And I work really hard to make the best work I can for people. And they didn't end up hiring me, and that was fine. I was honestly relieved.
Yeah.
Because I was worried that she was not going to be happy with what I would end up delivering.
Yeah, because then you're not happy because
and
you're
I
trying to
wouldn't, yeah,
please.
I'm not happy if someone else isn't happy.
Yeah.
And the second time it happened was this past fall. And I sent them like 3 or 4 galleries of different sizes of weddings, different places, because they were like looking for examples of how their wedding would look, but I didn't have one specific wedding that fit all of their things. So it was like in the mountains, but larger wedding party or small, and this kind of look. So I was saying, here's a bunch of weddings that have all the pieces of what you're looking
Elements,
for.
yeah.
And she came back with like, can we talk about some specific stuff that we didn't like? And sometimes it was like
terrifying.
elements of the portrait session.
Yeah.
And I was like, look, be brutal, because I'm not offended if you don't like it.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't affect me. It doesn't affect, like, I have built enough confidence up over the last few years to not worry about what other people think. So tell me what you don't like and I'll talk to you about it. And it was like, I don't like when these pictures where there's a blurry thing in the foreground that doesn't seem to fit with the background.
Interesting.
And 2 of them were literally just like the tall grass that was in the foreground.
Right.
I was like, so that was a part of the scene.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just using it to creatively experiment. Sometimes you're just trying to give people different angles, different things. Right. Sometimes you leave a thing in there and it's maybe not your favorite portrait ever, but you're like, they might like it.
You want to include it. Yeah.
So I'm including it. And then I was like, these other ones where there's like this is her out of focus bouquet in the foreground, which is a little bit passé, like a little bit old school, a little bit past to put a blurry thing in the foreground. But there was a guy on a bike that I'm blocking out with it, who was in the corner of the frame. Yeah. So like I was using it to blur, to remove something from
with
the frame.
Practical intention.
Yeah. And I could have probably photoshopped it or something, but I was just, it's in the creative process of that. She didn't like daytime flash because they wanted a specific mountain shot and it was 2 p.m. in July.
Right.
So they were in a slight patch of shade as a cloud came through and flash lit them up and background was in focus at like F11.
Portfolio?
It's in my portfolio.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
It's like long lens, make the mountain big.
Yep.
Yeah. And I really liked that picture, and they were like, and I was like, okay, fine, no daytime flash.
Yeah.
I'll put the sun behind you. I'll stand you under some trees. That's fine.
Yeah.
But that was the problem solving mechanism for a 2 p.m. photo shoot where they wanted to get the mountain in the background in the shot. And there was a variation of it where I think they maybe were in some shade and I just tried to balance it out, but the mountain was a bit further away looking and it was a bit blown out.
Yeah.
They preferred that one.
Right.
And I'm like, that's fine. But I was like, I actually said to her, I was like, if you're like, a lot of these things are just the process that I use to problem solve, to try things and to creatively experiment on a wedding day. And I don't want you to feel worried if you see me crouching down behind a coffee table shooting through some flowers.
Right.
So I might not be the person for you, and that's totally fine.
Right.
And she came back to me and she was like, no, we like your work enough. It was just a couple things. We still want to hire you. And they booked, and then some really bad family stuff happened and they ended up having to cancel. She was like, so she kind of just canceled the wedding, but she was like, I'll get back in touch when we're ready to move forward again.
Well, I was going to say, it's like when you have that level of, I actually really enjoy those because I had a client and we did their engagement session and then they came back with feedback from their engagement session. And that was actually really helpful. So I could know about the things that they did or didn't like about themselves. I'm like, okay, we're shooting on this side of your face. It's like, if we're turning you this way, we're doing this. And it really did allow us to hone in on the things that they wanted on their wedding day. Where it's like, where those sorts of conversations become scary and threatening to the photographer is where like, okay, you don't like this photo. That was literally a problem-solving mechanism I used to remove a biker, or the sun was very unflattering.
Yeah.
And so we used the flash. And you say you don't like it stylistically. Yeah, it was a stylistic choice within the confines of the problems of the light within the moment.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm happy to give you like, dude, if I could give you golden hour light for 8 hours, let's freaking go, dude.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm happy. But like, part of the thing I like to champion in my work is you can give me literally any lighting scenario, and then I can problem solve my way into giving you something that I think is creative and gets me excited. And so ideally, if it makes me excited and then you get excited from seeing what makes me excited, we're going to be a great match, dude.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, I'm like, cause you say you have criticism of this thing. I'm like, yeah, I probably would have done it differently if the light was different too.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, but the question becomes, are you okay enough with that work to where if you see like, oh no, that's great. That's super cool that we did this in this environment and it had to be that way because the light was a certain way. Or do you want somebody who would just completely throw out that entire scene, move you to an entirely different place? Because that's a problem-solving choice that then gets subcategorized into style.
Yeah.
You know, and kind of the thing, like if you put us right here and then we'll move things around, make things work for that scene right there versus somebody who wants to move it into. That is a stylistic choice that varies from person to person.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you look at our whole body of work, you know, in its entirety and then go, yeah, I would probably nitpick my own stuff too, man. It's like, it's like the things I'm probably most proud of are pulling out creative things when I didn't expect that place to be a creative place to be. It's kudos to you for, and I've done it too, held the hard conversations where I'm like, all right, you're going to rip me a new one. Let's go. And, but it's like, okay, there's context to this thing that you're ripping apart. That's part of the equation here. And are you okay if things turn out this way? And then how much more do I have to adapt on your day to make it something else that you would do differently because you're a different person?
Yeah.
Or do you just trust me to make technical decisions as much as I make artistic decisions?
Yeah.
Dude, that's a big convoluted. Trust a photographer is a very big deal.
Yeah.
Oh.
The couple that I just photographed their wedding on the 29th of December. I did their engagement session back in like March, and I always give people like a bit of a pep talk before the engagement session, especially the first time that like I've shot with them. And I'm kind of like, if I'm saying nothing, assume you're doing the right thing and keep doing it. When I'm giving you directions, it might seem weird. You're gonna be like, what the heck are you asking us to do? And I'm like, it's less about the thing I'm asking you to do and more about how you guys react with each other. So give yourself permission to just giggle at each other, to laugh a little bit. You don't need to stand exactly how I say. You can smile at each other. You can sort of like, you know, give each other little kisses if it feels right or whatever, but just like go along with the weird thing that I'm asking you to do and give me your trust in that. Because if I say it and someone doesn't really commit and go along with it, it'll look awkward.
Right.
And if I ask you to do the awkward thing and you let go a little bit and allow yourself to be sillier and laugh with your fiance, those more genuine expressions come out. And after I gave them that pep talk, they went with it great. They fully went in on it. And then at the wedding day, they were like, I'll do what you tell me to do. Because I had no idea what the heck you were doing. You were standing in weird places. Like, you were crouched down behind a yucca plant. Like, and we were like, kind of like, we could not see what you were planning or seeing.
Yeah.
And it came out great. Better than we'd ever expected. Some of it was super creative and just, we had no idea what those pictures were going to look like. So tell us what to do. We will do it. And the whole day I was like, well, do you like the building or do you like the trees for the background? They were like, whatever you think's best. And I was like, well, the light's nicer over here right now, so let's use this. And then the building ended up not working, so we moved them because the light came out and it was right in everybody's eyes. And then later we went back and did the building because there was nicer light. And they just like were like, whatever you want to do, we're going to do it. So they gave me that freedom. And I think it made their pictures better by them having buy-in too.
Right. The trust.
Because if I hadn't done that engagement session on their wedding day, they might have been a little less like, okay, let's go fully in on it and like
Right.
full trust or whatever. They might have been a bit like, what the heck are we getting asked to do
Right.
here? But they kind of knew what to expect from the experience of the engagement session, that the pictures I would end up pulling out of it would be
right. And that's just like, it's funny. It's like, because the whole thing I just said about the scariness of having that conversation, I feel like I need to put a giant disclaimer on, because it's like every image that you just described, like, oh, we're going to set this up this way or do this way because the light is this way. And then color contrast is this way. Composition is this way. We're making 100 different decisions between the one still, like, and it's not that we're so smart, we're so good, we know how to do it. It's like, okay, if you do love the whole body, there's 1,000 decisions that went into that portfolio. Thousands and thousands of decisions, more so than just the creative fuel. Do you trust us to make those creative things based on the portfolio? Or it's like, it might be better to find somebody whose entire portfolio you do resonate with, so you can just allow them to make those decisions too. Because
that's the better choice, even if it costs you more money.
Yeah.
Or less money.
Well, because my whole desire, and it's not that I won't bend over backwards for my clients, and that's the disclaimer I wanted to get at. It's like, because I will modify things for people. It's like, how many of the 20 decisions that go into an image are they thinking about 3 of them, or are they thinking about all those 20? And then are they wanting to, because shoot, yeah, no, if you're a photographer and you want to do the thing and you have this idea and you want me to fulfill that idea of your vision, absolutely. When mom says, oh, this would be great if we got a photo of the flowers by the cake. And I'm like, okay, it sounds like, and I'm just throwing out just a very oversimplified example. I'm like, but when they describe something, I'm like, it sounds to me like you have a very specific vision for what this should be. Mm-hmm. Is that what you're thinking? It's like, and then they go, maybe it's, oh yeah, no, that's great. Or it's like, well, I don't know. I've had that too. I'm like, okay, like, is there any other words that you could give me? It's kind of, like, fulfilling vision is very, very difficult thing to do.
Yeah.
And so trusting a photographer's vision is invaluable if you find somebody you do trust, because otherwise, yes, I'll bend over backwards and I'll change things and I'll do things based on what they want. And I'll collaborate. I love collaborating to make a cool image. But I want to make sure, if you love my whole portfolio, then that's what I can create for your wedding day on autopilot if everything in my life or your life is going wrong. Yeah. It's like, let's say my dog died, or I suffered a horrific tragedy in some capacity, and I'm still showing up at the wedding because that's what I do, and it's like, and I'm creatively not there, but you have a process. I have a process.
And you can follow it.
And I can jump into the creative bandwagon even if I'm like, part of me is dead.
Yeah.
While I'm there, and I can still make it. And I've had a couple of those. And based on the portfolio, you would never know that part of my life was falling apart,
Yeah.
And it's like my low level day is still like I knocked it out of the park kind of way. And I worked really hard to get to that. But it's like, so if you can't trust the whole thing, I would much rather you find somebody you can.
Yeah.
Because it's like, because the same goes for everybody else in life.
Yeah.
Unless they don't show up because their boyfriend's grandfather died, which has been a thing I got a call about, to be able to shoot someone's wedding because their photographer said they couldn't come because their boyfriend's grandfather died. And I'm like, yeah, sure. Let me know what you need to do for me to help you.
Yeah.
And so I became the photographer.
Wow.
And I'm like, not that that's, I feel bad for that person, but that's,
I mean, that sucks. I would still be at work.
I would, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But,
if my wife died, different conversation. I got a guy, Liam. He's an award-winning photographer. You're going to love him. My wife died. And then I'm going to break down on the phone with that person.
Yeah.
And they're going to understand,
Yeah. I think the same. I'm showing up unless I break my leg on the way and I'm literally going to the hospital. Or if Quinn or Melissa dies, I'm probably not going to work.
I'm out of commission for months.
I'm calling you or any other photographer I know to go and cover that day and probably just give you the whole money to pay you the
I'm not
entirety
taking any money if that happens.
And do the editing, please.
No, if that happens, I'm doing all the work for you and I ain't taking no money. Because that's fair. That's friggin', yeah.
Yeah, it's moments like any other time. Funnily enough, I was thinking about this the other day, so I'm just going to, as we're talking about not showing up to weddings, last year? 2020, it was 2023 season. I was sick enough for a full week leading up to a double wedding weekend that I thought I might not make it to the weddings, and I was kind of asking around people if someone could cover at least for the first day if I wasn't quite ready yet.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
One guy I knew was like, I have a wedding like really far away, but
I'll do it.
I'll make it if you really need someone. And the day of that wedding, I was like 90%. You know, and like I was like really, really sick in bed. Hi, Quinn.
What's up, buddy? He's like, he saw me. He's like,
what on
who
earth
is
is
this
happening
guy?
there?
What is happening?
So I was like sick in bed, throwing up, like unable to eat for like 5 days. Don't know what happened. Came back from it, was fine to go to the wedding. That wedding finished really late, and it was out of town in the mountains. So it was a 10-hour day.
Then you had
I was at 90%, finished at 1 a.m. They did their exit picture. I then had a hotel in that town.
Yeah.
Went to the hotel. The oldest lady in the world was on the desk.
Oh, God.
And she was taking such a long time to figure out the room. And then eventually she was like, it says someone's in that room, but that's the room. This is the room that's saying is open, but I think I gave someone a key for that room. Went up there, the chain was on the door.
Oh, Lord.
So I opened the door, heard someone freak out in the background, went back downstairs. I was like, someone is in that room. So then she's like looking for, she's like, oh, there must be another one. She went and tried the door, and they were like, what's going on? By this time, it was like 3 a.m.
Oh, my God.
And I had a wedding the next day.
Oh, no. Sick. And you had a multi-wedding weekend. Oh, my God.
Yeah. So I was like freaking out. I was like, I need to drive. Like, this is the only hotel in town that has a 24-hour check-in. It was like it was a little town. And
oh, my gosh.
So I was like, you know what? I can't wait any longer. So I'm going to just go and figure it out. So I went back and I ended up staying in like Canyon City.
So you drove how long to Canyon City?
It was probably an hour. I was going to drive all the way home to just sleep.
Yeah.
And then get back out there, same direction.
Done that.
But when I passed like the Holiday Inn, I was like, I could just stay here and it'd probably be fine. So ended up staying there. I was like, can I get a late checkout? And he was like, latest I can do is like 12 or something. And I was like, that's fine. I would need to be out by 12 to make it back to where I'm going. Like I was starting the wedding at 1 o'clock or something. And then 8-hour wedding day the next day on, I don't know, maybe 4 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
Because like my body wakes up because I'm stressed already when I went to sleep. And like, it was awful. And then on adrenaline made it through the next wedding day. But that, like, I think the work was up to par. Not necessarily actually the second day was the better one
always
overall, I
happens
think.
for me.
But the light was absolute trash on the first day, which sucked because I think the ceremony was so late in the afternoon that the sun was behind the mountains as the ceremony started. So it was already that kind of blue hour during the ceremony. Yeah. And I just didn't like it. That was also a couple that I made adjustments to my style for because they didn't like shallow depth of field.
Bro, if that's a question, we hate shallow depth.
That is now something that I would be like, look at my portfolio, look at my pictures. Yep. Not everything is super shallow depth of field.
Not everything.
Some of it is, but learning from that experience, because then I was doing portraits at f2.8, f3.2, and everything was a little more. I just didn't.
I have had
overall, it didn't look quite as pleasing throughout the day as I would have hoped, but I still like it. I still think I did a good job, and I would now address that much quicker. Right. Be like, if you don't like out of focus stuff, probably be careful.
Right. Well, it's like I had one client and they ended up liking, it's like, okay, so basically when you're looking at my portfolio, you like all my ultra wide stuff.
Yeah.
You like the couple in the middle, the sky is radically cool, and then you're lit up in the middle and it's a 16 millimeter or something. It's like, okay, a lot of my photojournalism was a 16 millimeter and you're a 2-hour elopement. Sure. I'm sticking the ultra wide on there and we're doing the majority of that in ultra wide. So you have lots of focus on everything, but it's like, but that's a massive low light tool is having a low aperture. And I'm like, that makes it harder, I guess, for us in the day of. It removes a tool from our tool bag. And granted, we can do it. We can totally do it. Like, can do it. It's like, but if we have 3 weddings that weekend and we have to keep the notes of our adaptation for that one, and it's in October, so we have 9 weddings that month. It's like, that's when I'm like, for your sake, if you like what I just output on autopilot, will be great. Because it's like, if I have 9 weddings in October, by the time I get to that 9th wedding, that's going to be one of the best weddings I ever shot. Because when I compress all my weddings, I feel like there's like a flow that happens.
You get in a flow. Yeah, for sure.
And it's like, I'm like, oh man, I want another fall season where I'm like, got a ton of weddings. Yeah. It's like, because it makes us better.
For sure.
Yeah, man, we've been talking for an hour, 40 minutes. This is probably a good time to...
Probably a good time. We only got to one topic on the list.
That's good.
That was those lenses, and then we bounced through.
I think that's great.
A lot of other random stuff.
Well, good. We have more for next week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. How do we end it? Tell everybody where they can find you on the internet.
Oh, yeah, that's a great idea. Okay, so my Instagram is thevibrant_CO for Colorado. And then, that's my Instagram. The website being thevibrantcolorado.com is mine. And then Liam, if you want.
For me, if you search Liam Gordon on the internet, you'll probably find my photography website or a footballer who is also a Liam Gordon. So
I think
you'll be able to tell the difference. On Instagram, liamgordon.photo is my wedding stuff. If you're looking at street stuff, the Liam Gordon. It's all kind of linked from one to the other though. So if you go to my wedding stuff, I think it's linked back to the street stuff. I even do a little motorsport stuff just for fun.
Oh, no way.
And that's Liam Gordon. Oh my God, what is it? liamgordon.motors on Instagram. And I really mostly only post the wedding stuff. But I've been doing motorsport stuff for fun. We should talk about that another time.
Yeah, we should.
And what else is there? You don't find me on TikTok. I really just post stuff on Instagram. YouTube.
Oh yeah,
the Liam Gordon on YouTube as well. More street stuff historically, but this year I'm going to start kind of reviewing wedding stuff and talking about more wedding stuff because that's what I'm going to have time for, and have less time to go and shoot street because it's a huge time commitment.
Also, your accent makes it way more fun to watch YouTube videos.
For Americans, yeah.
Yeah, for Americans, right. Precisely. It's, so go subscribe on YouTube. But this has been another photography podcast.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
2. Yeah, you too, man.
Awesome.